I always thought things between me and Lisa were solid. We'd been married for 10 years, had two amazing kids, and lived in a nice neighborhood. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. But lately, something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, just a nagging feeling that something wasn't right. It started with small things. Lisa was on her phone more often, smiling at texts she'd never share with me. She'd been going out more too, saying she was meeting up with her sister, Kelly. I didn't think much of it at first. Lisa and Kelly were close, so it made sense. But then it became a regular thing. Every weekend, sometimes even during the week, I'd be left with the kids while she went off to visit her sister. One night, after the kids were in bed, I noticed Lisa was packing an overnight bag. "You're staying with Kelly again?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Yeah, she's going through some stuff and needs me around," she said without looking at me, stuffing clothes into the bag. I nodded, but something about the way she said it didn't sit right with me. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something, but I didn't press her. I didn't want to seem like I was being paranoid. Besides, we'd always trusted each other. But that trust was starting to crack. One night, after she left, I decided to call Kelly just to check in. I'd never done that before, but I needed to ease my mind. Kelly picked up after a few rings, sounding surprised to hear from me. "Hey, is everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah, everything's fine. Just wanted to see how you're doing. Lisa's been spending a lot of time with you lately, so I figured I'd check in." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Yeah, I'm good. Lisa's here a lot, yeah, but we haven't been doing much. Just hanging out, you know." Her tone was off, like she was trying to cover something. My stomach tightened, but I didn't push it. "All right, well, let me know if you need anything." "Sure thing," she said quickly before hanging up. That conversation didn't sit right with me. Kelly wasn't the type to lie, but she didn't sound comfortable talking to me. I started to wonder if Lisa was really with her at all. The next time Lisa said she was going to Kelly's, I decided to follow her. I felt like a complete jerk doing it, but I had to know. I waited until she was a few blocks away before grabbing my keys and heading out. I kept my distance, driving slowly so she wouldn't notice me. I followed her across town, far away from Kelly's place. She pulled into a driveway in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. I parked down the street and watched as she got out of the car. A man came out of the house to greet her, and they hugged, longer than friends should. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I wanted to storm up to them and demand an explanation, but I held back. I needed to be sure, to gather proof before confronting her. So I sat in my car, heart pounding, watching as they went inside. After a few minutes, I got out and walked up to the house. There were bushes near the windows, providing some cover. I crouched down and peered inside, my stomach churning with anxiety. I could see them in the living rooms, sitting close on the couch, talking and laughing. The way she looked at him, the way she touched his arm, I knew then that she was cheating on me. I stayed there, frozen, watching them for what felt like hours. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I didn't need to. The look on her face said it all. She was happier with him than she'd been with me in months. Eventually, they got up and went upstairs. I didn't follow. I didn't need to see any more. I felt sick to my stomach, like my entire world had just crumbled. I stumbled back to my car and drove home in a daze, not even sure how I made it back. When I got home, I put the kids to bed and sat on the couch, staring at nothing. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do next. I knew I had to confront her, but I didn't want to do it without proof. I needed to catch them in the act, to have something she couldn't deny. But I also knew that once I did, there'd be no going back. Our marriage would be over, and our kids would be caught in the middle. I didn't want that, but I couldn't ignore what I'd seen. I couldn't pretend everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. The next day, I went about my routine as if nothing had happened. I took the kids to school, went to work, and tried to act normal. But inside, I was a wreck. I couldn't stop thinking about Lisa and that man, about what they were doing when I wasn't around. I started following her more often, each time feeling worse than the last. I'd watch them through the windows, taking photos with my phone, documenting everything. It felt wrong, but I needed evidence. I needed something to confront her with, something she couldn't weasel her way out of. The more I watched, the more certain I became. She was having an affair, and there was no way to salvage our marriage. But I couldn't bring myself to confront her yet. I was afraid of what would happen, of how our lives would change once the truth was out. So I waited, biding my time, gathering evidence until I couldn't take it anymore. I knew the confrontation was coming, and I dreaded it. But I also knew it was inevitable. Our lives were about to change forever, and there was no stopping it. The more I followed Lisa, the more the reality of the situation sank in. I had always thought we were strong, that we could weather anything, but seeing her with him, laughing, touching, and sneaking around behind my back, tore that belief to shreds. I was furious, but I was also heartbroken. I didn't know how to handle the flood of emotions that hit me every time I saw them together. After a couple of weeks of torturing myself, I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I had the photos, I had seen enough, and now it was time to confront her. I wasn't sure how she would react, but I needed to hear it from her, to force her to admit what she was doing. I needed closure. That Friday evening, after the kids were in bed, I sat on the couch, waiting for her to come home. She had told me she was going to Kelly's again, but I knew exactly where she was. I stared at the clock, each minute dragging by, every sound making me jump. Finally, around midnight, I heard the garage door open. My heart started pounding, and I clenched my fists, trying to stay calm. The front door creaked open, and she walked in smiling like nothing was wrong. "Hey, you're up late," she said, kicking off her shoes. "Yeah, couldn't sleep," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk." She looked at me, confused, but then something in my tone must have given it away because her expression changed. She looked nervous. "What's going on?" she asked, crossing her arms. I stood up and faced her, taking a deep breath. "I know you're not going to Kelly's," I said quietly. "I know you've been lying to me." Her face went pale, and she started shaking her head. "What are you talking about?" "I've been with Kelly." "Don't lie to me, Lisa," I interrupted, my voice rising. "I followed you. I know you've been seeing someone else. I've seen you with him. I've seen everything." She froze, her mouth hanging open. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just stared at me like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Then she shook her head again, more forcefully this time. "No, you've got it all wrong. I don't know what you think you saw, but it's not what you think." I felt a surge of anger. How could she still deny it after everything I'd seen? "Don't lie to me," I shouted, pulling out my phone and opening the gallery. I shoved it in her face, showing her the photos I'd taken. "Explain this. How do you explain this, Lisa?" She stared at the photos, her face crumbling as she realized there was no way out. She couldn't deny it anymore. I watched as tears filled her eyes, and she covered her mouth with her hand, looking like she was going to be sick. "I'm sorry," she whispered, barely audible. "I'm so sorry." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. Even though I had known the truth, hearing her admit it made it all real. My legs felt like they were going to give out, and I had to sit back down on the couch. "How long?" I asked, my voice trembling. "How long have you been seeing him?" She didn't answer at first, just stood there, crying silently. I could see the guilt and shame on her face, but that did nothing to ease the pain ripping through me. "Answer me," I demanded, louder this time. 6 months, she finally admitted, her voice cracking. "It's been going on for 6 months." 6 months. Half a year of lies, deceit, and betrayal. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How had she managed to hide it for so long? How had I been so blind? "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why would you do this to us? To our family?" She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said through her tears. "I was just so unhappy, and he made me feel special. I know it's no excuse, but that's the truth. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." Her words just made me angrier. "So you decided to throw away our marriage for some guy who made you feel special? You could have talked to me. We could have worked things out, Lisa." I know," she sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "I was stupid. I was selfish. I know I ruined everything." The anger and betrayal swirled inside me like a storm, but beneath it all there was a deep sadness. This was the woman I had built my life with, the mother of my children, and now everything we had was falling apart. "What are we supposed to do now?" I asked, my voice hollow. What do we tell the kids? How do we explain this to them? She shook her head, her sobs growing louder. I don't know. I don't know. We sat there in silence for a long time, both of us too devastated to say anything else. My mind was racing, thinking about all the things we would have to deal with: divorce, custody, the impact this would have on our kids. It was overwhelming, and I didn't know how to handle it. Finally, I broke the silence. You need to leave. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with shock. What? Where am I supposed to go? I don't care, I said coldly. But you can't stay here, not after this. But the kids. I'll take care of them, I said firmly. You're the one who messed up. You're the one who has to deal with the consequences. She started crying again, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I was too hurt, too angry. I needed her out of the house, out of my life, so I could start to heal. Please let me stay, she begged. I'll sleep on the couch. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't make me leave. I want to be here for the kids. But I shook my head. You made your choice, Lisa. You chose him over us. Now you have to live with that. She didn't say anything after that, just nodded slowly, defeated. She stood up and walked to our bedroom, her steps heavy with the weight of what she had done. I heard her packing a bag, and a few minutes later, she came back downstairs. I'm so sorry, she whispered one last time before walking out the door. I sat there for hours after she left, staring at nothing, trying to process everything that had just happened. My world had been shattered, and I didn't know how to pick up the pieces. All I knew was that I had to be strong for my kids. They were the only thing keeping me from completely falling apart. The days after Lisa left were some of the hardest I've ever lived through. I had to keep it together for the kids, but every time they asked about their mom, I felt a knot tighten in my chest. I didn't know how to tell them the truth without breaking their hearts. So I kept it simple at first, telling them that Mom was staying somewhere else for a while because we needed some space. It wasn't long before they started asking tougher questions. When is Mom coming back? Why did she leave? I could see the confusion and hurt in their eyes, and it killed me. I didn't have the answers they wanted, and I didn't want to lie to them either. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table, my oldest, Jake, who was just 8 years old, looked at me with serious eyes. Dad, is this our fault? Did we do something to make Mom leave? Hearing those words felt like a punch to the gut. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. No, Jake, none of this is your fault. You and your sister did nothing wrong. This is between your mom and me, and it has nothing to do with you. But why won't she come home? He asked, his voice trembling. I struggled with what to say. I didn't want to put the burden of our problems on their young shoulders, but I also knew that being too vague would only confuse them more. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, I began carefully. And when that happens, it can be hard to fix things. But I want you to know that your mom loves you both very much, and no matter what happens between us, that will never change. They seemed to accept that, but I could tell they were still hurting. I was hurting too, but I couldn't let it show. I had to be strong for them, even when I felt like I was barely holding on. In the weeks that followed, I focused on creating some sense of normalcy for the kids. I threw myself into being a dad, doing everything I could to keep their lives stable. We had movie nights, went to the park, and I even tried my hand at baking cookies with them, though that didn't go so well. But the effort mattered, and slowly the routine started to help. Lisa reached out a few times asking to see the kids. I couldn't keep them from her forever, and as much as I hated the idea of seeing her again, I knew it was important for them. We arranged for her to pick them up from school a couple of times a week, and I made sure to be out of the house when she brought them back. I couldn't face her yet, not without the anger boiling over. One night, after she had dropped them off, I found myself sitting alone in the living room, staring at the photo of our family hanging on the wall. It was taken last Christmas, all of us smiling in front of the tree. We looked so happy, so complete. But now, that picture felt like a cruel reminder of what I had lost. I had been trying so hard to keep it together for the kids that I hadn't allowed myself to really feel the weight of the betrayal. But sitting there alone in the quiet house, it all came crashing down. I let the tears flow, the anger, and sadness overwhelming me. I had loved Lisa with everything I had, and she had thrown it all away for some fleeting affair. The grief was suffocating, but as the days turned into weeks, I started to see a way forward. I knew that holding on to the anger would only keep me trapped in the past. I had to let go, not for her sake, but for mine and the kids. They needed a dad who could be present, who could move on and build a new life for them. It wasn't easy, and some days were better than others. I missed the idea of our family, the future I had envisioned with Lisa, but I knew that future was gone, and clinging to it would only hurt me more. So I started making plans for the future without her. I reached out to a lawyer to start the divorce process, something I had been putting off because it felt so final, but it was necessary. We worked out the custody arrangements, joint custody with the kids staying with me during the week and with Lisa on weekends. It wasn't what I had imagined for my family, but it was the best I could do for now. Lisa and I had one final conversation when we signed the divorce papers. It was brief, more about logistics than anything else. She apologized again, but I didn't want to hear it. I told her that we needed to focus on the kids and make sure they knew they were loved, no matter what had happened between us. She agreed, and as we parted ways, I felt a strange sense of relief. The chapter with Lisa was over, and while it was painful, it also meant I could start a new one. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I poured myself into my work, finding solace in the routine and the sense of accomplishment it brought. I spent as much time as I could with the kids, making new memories with them, ones that weren't overshadowed by the past. I also started going to therapy, something I had never considered before. It helped to talk to someone who wasn't involved, someone who could help me sort through the mess of emotions I was feeling. Slowly, I started to heal. The pain didn't disappear, but it became more manageable. There were moments when I felt like I could finally breathe again, when I could see a future where I wasn't defined by what had happened. I started going out more, meeting new people, and even went on a few dates. I wasn't ready for anything serious, but it felt good to know that there was life after Lisa. One day, as I was playing catch with the kids in the backyard, I realized that we were going to be okay. We had been through hell, but we were coming out the other side. We were still a family, even if it wasn't the one I had imagined. And that was enough. The divorce didn't break me. It hurt. It changed me, but it didn't define me. I still had my kids, my job, and a future that was wide open. Lisa's betrayal had shattered the life we had built together, but it didn't destroy me. I was still standing, still moving forward, and that was all that mattered. As I watched my kids laugh and play, I felt a sense of peace. Life wasn't perfect, but it was still good. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could truly move on.